Thanks, Carol. Hi, everyone. My name is Jane, and I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is December 30th, 1991, and my story is Student of Life. It's in the fourth edition, as Carol mentioned. And I want to give one little bit of housekeeping first. I'm on a very old laptop. I have so I can't type. So my keyboard on the laptop doesn't work. So I have to use this thing, but I don't have enough room to put it here. So the reason I'm going through all this is that I can't answer any chats. I can't respond to any chats. So I'm sorry for that, but um and maybe it's not an issue in this meeting since the way that you do the chats. Okay, but I just wanted to clarify that. I have a new laptop, but it's in a box down by my feet. I was terrified of, when you try to improve the technology, something goes wrong. And so I wanted to get this meeting done first, and today I'll fix this issue. Anyway, so yeah, my story, Student of Life, is not what I titled it. Student of Life, SOL, probably appropriate, but I called it Miss I Never, and I understand why they changed it because it's Miss I Never, which is hard to say and have people understand what I mean. It's awkward. Um, but anyway, that's how I felt, that I had never done all these things that prove you're an alcoholic. And I'll get into that in my story, but I've thought of alcoholics as old men in trench coats under a bridge drinking out of a paper bag, and that's partially true, but that wasn't me. And I was also young. I was 26 when I got sober, and I was a woman. There are no women aren't alcoholics. They might drink a lot, but certainly not alcoholics. um so I felt that I didn't have any of the qualifications. And what I did do is I looked up some meetings in my area when I was starting to realize that I was not drinking like a normal person. And I wanted to go to these AA meetings in my area and ask them how I could, you know, calm this heavy drinking problem down, because I wasn't as bad as they were, but surely they could help me. Surely they would have advice on how I could drink like a normal person. And someone told me later, after I shared that I thought I had a mild case of severe alcoholism, and I never understood what that meant. I'm like, what? Now I get it. Now I get it. No such thing. Garden variety drunk. That's what I am. Garden variety drunk. That's why I'm in the book, because um, they were looking to reach as many types of people as possible with the fourth edition, and they'll do that with the fifth edition. Try to reach more people who could relate to these stories. So my story must be, quite basic, quite standard, garden variety drunk, and all I did was tell it well. That's it. Anyway, um, so I'll go ahead and read I was lucky because I've heard that the literature committee was looking for more stories. And when I heard that, I thought, oh, that's a great idea. I think I'll write that out. That sounds very cleansing. It sounds like a great thing to do. So I wrote it out. I typed it out on it was an IBM, I think, little tiny computer with this tiny screen that when you type, the letters come up in green font. And so I typed it all up, printed it out on a dot matrix printer. And then the next night, I read it and edited it a little bit and folded it up into an envelope and sent it in. And didn't think that was 1998, I think. I might have my dates wrong, but I'm pretty sure that was February 98. And didn't think anything else of it after that. And then I read in the Grapevine, because I've always been a Grapevine subscriber, and I really love the Grapevine, and I would wholeheartedly champion that. If you don't get a subscription to the Grapevine, you're missing out. Anyway, in the Grapevine, they said they were about to choose they were down to like 42 stories. They were going to pick half of them. And I thought, I submitted my story a long time ago and I've moved since I submitted it. So they don't have my correct information and the post office isn't going to forward it because I moved more than 2 years ago. So I emailed the editor of the Grapevine and said, I know this is a long shot and this is ridiculous, but I don't want to ever wonder, what if. And I explained who I was and why I was writing. And like literally 2 hours later, I got an email from, I think her name is Victoria of the literature committee. And she said, your story is still under consideration, so please send us your new information. And I almost fainted, very excited. And so I sent them all my information and they told me they were going to let me know. I think I don't remember the years, it's all running together, but they gave me a time frame that they would be telling me or telling all of us. And so I expected if my story got accepted, I was expected this big packet like of my story printed out with, red ink where they were making changes that I'd have to initial and like approve and all that. So when I got this business size letter, just a light, simple letter, I thought, oh, they didn't choose it. They didn't pick my story. And I was so disappointed. But thank goodness I opened the letter. There were 2 pieces of paper in it. One piece of paper said, we want to use your story. And the second piece of paper said, sign it over. They didn't care at all what I thought of any changes they were going to make. Talk about keeping it simple. All they wanted to know is that I hadn't signed it over to anyone else, like the Grapevine. It was 2 different entities, that they could take ownership of my story as it was written. And I signed it, sent it back, and that's the last I've heard from them. I've heard nothing else, except they sent me a book. They sent me a 4th edition once it was printed, but that was it. Keep it simple and stay anonymous. So anyway, I will go ahead. It was a cleansing thing to do. And I look at it as such a gift that someone could read my story somewhere and be helped by it, and I would never know. And that's an amazing gift. And there's also one other gift that I got from this that I wasn't expecting. That because, like I mentioned, I was very young when I came in, female, still thought I had so much partying left in me. Surely I could make it back if I needed to, or surely this was just a phase, or I wasn't really an alcoholic. I really was that mild case that could maybe, survive. I was so jealous of people that came in at 40 and 50, like all the drinking you got to do. And, I realize now the fallacy of that thinking, but I really felt that way. Well, if the literature committee of the General Service Office of Alcoholics Anonymous thinks that your story belongs in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, then guess what? You're a drunk and I belong here. This is where I belong. And there's no phase. There's no mild case. This garden variety drunk, and I'm right where I need to be. Anyway, student of life, living at home with her parents, she tried willpower to beat the obsession to drink. But it wasn't until she met another alcoholic and went to an AA meeting that sobriety took hold. In a nutshell, I started drinking at age 18, rather a late bloomer by today's standards. But after I started, the disease of alcoholism hit me with a vengeance and made up for lost time. After I had been drinking for several years and seriously wondering if I did indeed have a problem with alcohol, I read one of the Are You an Alcoholic quiz type checklists. Much relieved, I found that almost nothing applied to me. I had never lost a job, a spouse, children, or any material possessions through alcohol. The fact that my drinking hadn't allowed me to gain any of those things crossed my mind only after I came into AA. I can't blame 1 ounce of my drinking on my upbringing. My parents were loving and supportive and have been married 35 years. They are still alive and they have now been married 62 years. So crazy, but it's true. It happens. No one else in my family exhibits alcoholic drinking or alcoholic behavior. My parents are not alcoholics. Neither is my sister. She starts singing as soon as she has 2 wine coolers, if they even make those things anymore. For some reason, despite the resources available to me growing up, I developed into an adult woman terrified of the world around me. I was extremely insecure, though I was careful to hide this fact. I was unable to handle and understand my emotions. I always felt as if everyone else knew what was going on and what they were supposed to be doing, and my life was the only one that was delivered without an instruction book. When I discovered alcohol, everything changed. I took my first real drink my first night at college. I attended what was to be the first of many, many fraternity parties. I didn't care for the beer, so I went to the vat of innocuous-looking punch. I was told it was laced with grain alcohol. I don't remember how many drinks I had, and my recollections of the actual events of the night, rest of the night, are fuzzy, but I do remember this much. When I was drinking, I was okay. I understood. Everything made sense. I could dance, talk, and enjoy being in my own skin. It was as if I had been an unfinished jigsaw puzzle with one piece missing. As soon as I took a drink, that last piece instantly and effortlessly snapped into place. If I could change anything, the first thing I would change, there were several pieces missing, not just one piece, but the idea is the same. I don't remember getting home that night, but I woke up the next morning completely dressed and in full makeup and alone, thank God. I was sick as a dog, but I managed to crawl into the shower and prepare for my first college class. I sat through the entire class, pleading with my eyes to the professor to let us out early. He kept us to the bell, and when it rang, I flew into the women's room, crashed into the first stall, and threw everything up. The insanity of the disease had already manifested itself. I recall thinking as I knelt retching in the stall that this was fantastic. Life was great. I had finally found the answer: alcohol. Yes, I overdid it the night before, but I was new to this game. I only had to learn how to drink right, and I was set. I attempted to drink right for the next 8 years. My progression was phenomenal. There's absolutely no period in my drinking career that can be described as social drinking. I blacked out almost every time I put alcohol into my system, but I decided I could live with that. It was a small price to pay for the power and confidence alcohol gave me. After drinking for less than 6 months, I was almost a daily drinker. I wound up on academic probation. I had always been on the honor roll in high school, my first semester sophomore year, and my response to that was to change my major. So here, I like to pause and say there is a gentleman who writes in his story, The Window of Opportunity, that normal people change their behavior to meet their goals, but alcoholics change their goals to meet their behavior. And that's exactly what I did. I didn't realize it at the time, but I want to just point out that my major was, as the major I had was a result of a child. Like, I knew what I wanted to be since I was a little kid. I knew what I wanted to do, what I wanted to be. My major was a direct result of that desire of the career that I wanted. And it only took a couple semesters of drinking to say, no, I'm going to do something different because it's more important to me to drink and party. And I don't think normal people, normal drinkers do that. I made a huge life change based on whether or not I could drink. My life on campus revolved around parties, drinking, and men. I surrounded myself with people who drank as I did. Even though several people had already expressed their concern over my drinking, I rationalized I was only doing what every other red-blooded college student did. Somehow I managed to graduate, but while most of my friends were securing good jobs and abruptly stopping their boozing, I seemed to be left behind on campus. I had resolved that I too would now settle down and drink properly, but to my frustration, I found I could not do so. I took a pitiful sales job that paid next to nothing, so I continued to live with my parents. I kept this job for 2 years for one reason. It allowed me to drink with minimal interference. My pattern was to pick up a fifth of whiskey somewhere during my round of appointments and keep it under the car seat with me. When I got home in the evening, I drank at least half the fifth in front of the television set and watched reruns until I passed out. And I did this every night by myself for almost 2 years. I had become a daily isolated drinker and was starting to get a little nervous. My behavior at this point was textbook. I was stashing bottles all over the house, sneaking drinks from my parents' small supply when I ran out, rationing the number of bottles I threw away at the same time so the trash bags wouldn't clink, refilling my parents' vodka and gin bottles with water, and so on. I had resorted to videotaping my favorite reruns while I was watching them because I always blacked out before the ending. So those reruns were Columbo shows, like the murder mystery movie. It was Columbo, Macmillan and Wife, McLeod, and I loved Columbo. I just loved it. And I videotaped so many of them that I had a big rack of VHS tapes with Columbo all over. And I would watch the ending the next day because I didn't remember half of the endings. About this time, the TV movie My Name is Bill W., about the co-founder of AA, was aired. Intrigued, I sat down with my whiskey and soda bottles to watch it. When Bill whipped out a flask in the car to bolster himself before a visit with his father-in-law, I heaved a sigh of relief. Oh, I'm not that bad, I thought to myself. I then proceeded to get drunk and to black out. I don't remember any more of the movie. That's true. I didn't, but I have purchased it. I now bought it so I could watch the whole thing once I got sober. My parents were at a total loss. I was going nowhere and I was irritable and hostile. Since they had no experience with alcoholism, they had no idea what was wrong with me or what to do about it, and neither did I. I knew that I drank too much, and I knew that my life was miserable, but I never made the connection between those two conditions. My parents made the only suggestion that then made sense to them. They offered to help me financially if I wanted to go back to school. Seeing no other way out, I jumped at the opportunity. I spent 2 years in graduate school, 750 miles from home. I can honestly say I know why they call it a geographical cure. For about 9 months, I was able to cut my drinking down sharply. I still drank almost every day, but not to the point of my usual stupors, and I didn't black out very often. I was able to concentrate on my schoolwork and that first year and make lots of friends, and I still had a reputation as a big drinker, which really surprised me. I'm like, this is nothing. I'm like not drinking nearly like I can or have in the past, and I still had a reputation as a big drinker. However, geographical cures are only temporary. Mine lasted a little less than a year. After about 10 months or so, I slowly started to slide back into my old patterns. Steadily, I worked my way back to the same quantities of whiskey I drank at home, and the blackouts returned. My grades started to drop, and my friends started to wonder. I even began watching Columbo reruns again. I had brought my homemade videotapes with me to school. Fortunately, I managed to graduate. It was a 2-year program. If it had been longer than that, I'm not sure I would have made it. I managed to graduate, but I had gone nowhere. After graduation, I returned to my parents' house as I had been unsuccessful in securing a job. I was back. I was back in my old bedroom, back to the same routine of drinking every evening until I passed out, and it was getting worse. I was starting earlier and earlier and consuming more and more liquor. I had no job, no friends. I saw no one but my parents. I was beyond frustration at this point. Hadn't I done everything that was expected of me? Hadn't I graduated from college and gone on to earn a master's degree? I had never gone to jail, crashed any cars, or got into any trouble like a real alcoholic would. When I was working, I never missed a day because of drinking. I never ran myself into debt, nor had I abused a spouse or children. Sure, I drank a lot, but I didn't have a problem. How could I when I hadn't done any of the things that prove you're an alcoholic? So what was the problem? All I really wanted was a decent job so I could be independent and productive. I could not understand why life just wouldn't cut me a break. I did odd projects around the house for my parents to earn my keep until I took a job for a local entrepreneur. The job did not offer much opportunity for advancement, nor did it pay very well, but it got me out of the house, out of my parents' house. I still couldn't afford to live anywhere else. and it was challenging in many ways. And that's very true. That was a very challenging job. At this point, I was in a vicious battle to control my drinking. I knew that if I took only one drink, I'd lose complete control and drink until I passed out. That is the only thing I understood when I came in here, that it's the first drink that gets you drunk. I'm like, yeah, duh. That's the only thing I understood. I did not understand first things first. I did not understand one day at a time. I did not understand easy. Nothing made sense except the first drink gets you drunk. Nevertheless, I tried day after day to beat this obsession with alcohol. I picked up a half gallon of whiskey one day after work and drank over 1/3 of it in less than 4 hours that night. I was so sick the next day, but I made it to work. When I got home from work, I sat on my parents' sofa and I knew I would start working on the half gallon again, despite the fact that I was still very ill from the night before. I also knew that I did not want to drink. Sitting on that sofa, I realized that the old "I could stop if I want to, I just don't want to" didn't apply here because I did not want to drink. I watched myself get up off the sofa and pour myself a drink. When I sat back down on the sofa, I started to cry. My denial had cracked. I believe I hit bottom that night, but I didn't know that then. I just thought I was insane. I proceeded to finish the half gallon. 6 months later, my boss flew me to California for a trade show. I hated working the shows, but I loved to travel, so I went. I was extremely nervous about this trip because my boss liked to party, and we were flying in a guy our age from Hawaii to work the show with us. At this point, I had managed to hold together, white knuckling, 31 days without a drink, and I was terrified that I would give in to the temptation of being on an all expenses paid trip in a fun city with two party animals. It had been very difficult for me to stay dry for 31 days. The obsession spoke to me every day. I was scheduled for surgery in March 31st of 1992. And it was very important that this surgery go off. And I had told my surgeon that I was a heavy drinker, and he said that could impact whether I had the surgery or not. So I was white knuckling it to get past that surgery. I had absolutely no intention of staying sober past get through the surgery and I could drink again. I arrived late on a Friday and managed not to drink that night. The next morning at the show, I was offered the gift that changed my life. Our Hawaiian sales rep seemed frustrated. I thought he was disappointed that he hadn't managed to write an order for a couple he had just finished working with. I went over to console him. He said no, his mood had nothing to do with the couple. Instead, he explained that just this week he had lost his girlfriend, dropped out of school, lost his apartment, and also lost his full-time job. He added, "I'm an alcoholic. I've been sober for a year and a half, except I just drank again this past week, and I'm a mess about it." At that very instant, I heard one word in my head. The word was now, and I knew it meant say something now. To my amazement, I spoke the words, "Mike, I think I'm one too." Mike's mood instantly changed. I recognized now it was hope. We started talking. Among other things, I told him I hadn't had a drink for about a month, didn't go to AA. When he asked why I avoided AA, I told him it was because I didn't think I had hit bottom. Somehow he didn't laugh, but said, "You hit bottom when you stop digging." He took me to my first 3 AA meetings. It was the second meeting that clinched my resolve to pursue sobriety. There were about 35 people in attendance, but the space was small, so the meeting seemed very crowded. Being from out of town, I stood up and introduced myself to the chairperson. When asked to by the chairperson. Later on in the meeting, the chairperson called on me to share. I got up and somehow walked over to the microphone and podium. I've never been so nervous in all my life. But the words came out naturally as I described the events that led up to the meeting that night. As I spoke, I looked around the room. More importantly, I looked at the faces of the people in the room, and I saw it. I saw the understanding, the empathy, and the love. Today, I believe that I saw my higher power for the first time in those faces. While still up at the podium, it hit me. This is what I had been looking for all my life. This was the answer right here in front of me. Indescribable relief came over me. I knew the fight was over. That happened in San Diego. And I did look at the faces of the people in the room, and one woman in particular, if she hasn't changed in over 30 years, I would recognize her still. I did see in those faces exactly what I said, understanding and hope. I saw hope and an eagerness in, especially in that woman's face, like just happiness that I was there. And that really, really hit me. People were paying attention, and I was just like, wow, this is where I want to be. And I will also mention that Mike is still sober. Mike also now has 32 years of sobriety, and he always complains that he's a month behind me, and that doesn't seem fair since he's the one that 12-stepped me into the program. He is married 30 some years now, almost 30 years. He has two amazing daughters. They're out of, I think one of them's out of college and one is still in college. He still lives in Hawaii. Lucky bastard. You should see his house. He lives on Kauai with a view of the ocean. He owns retail shops in Hawaii that make locally made gifts. And I don't want to call it a tourist trap, but it has locally made gifts, and it has Polynesian type themed gifts in his shops. And he does very well, and he's still sober. And I saw him this past summer in their new house, and I saw him also in 2017. So it had been 25 years in 2017 since we had seen each other. And it is just such a gift, such a gift. Everyday miracles is what I call our meeting. Everyday miracles. Later on that night, still reeling in the ecstasy of relief and hope, I remembered the afternoon in the bathroom stall at college after my first class when I was so certain I had found the answer in alcohol. I could clearly see now that that had been a lie. That is the description that fits alcohol best for me. It is a lie, an evil, insidious lie. And I chased that lie for a long time, even when it was obvious that I was going nowhere and killing myself while doing it. At that AA meeting, when I looked out over all those faces, I finally saw the truth. When I returned home, I threw myself into AA. I did 90 meetings in 90 days, got a sponsor, joined a home group. I did everything that was suggested. I made coffee, took commitments, and got involved with service. I rode the roller coaster of early sobriety. Every second was worth it to get where I am today. It is very important to my recovery to study and work the steps. To this day, I still make at least 2-step meetings a week. That's not quite true anymore. I still make meetings, but there are not a lot of step meetings in my new area. But I do read the book on my own. I have a sponsor who guides me through the steps gently but firmly with a sure-handedness I hope I'm able to emulate with the 2 women I now sponsor. I do still have a sponsor, and I also still sponsor 2 women, not the same 2 women, but I have 2 women that I sponsor. The promises have begun to materialize for me, and there's still so much work to do. It's almost impossible to adequately describe how much the program has given me in just these 6 short years. I have been financially supporting myself in my own apartment for 5 years and plan to buy a house next year. I've secured a good job with a promising future. My income has increased more than 150% since I got sober. I did buy a house the following year, just like I said. And I just retired from that very same job after 29 years of amazing, amazing service, fabulous job. Great company, great people to work with. I've heard of people complain about work and their coworkers, and I did not have that. I really didn't, and I'm so grateful. I worked with giants. I had great, smart, driven people to work with. It was stressful, and yes, it was a job, but for if you have to work, I was very lucky. I was very lucky. And now I'm 58 years old and I can retire for real. So I'm so fortunate. But just as material losses and material gains are not necessarily necessary to indicate alcoholism or recovery, material gains are not the true indications of sobriety. The real rewards aren't material in nature because any of that could have changed. That's not sobriety is not a guarantee. It's not going to happen for me. It's not going to happen without sobriety. But it's not a guarantee that everything's going to go right. Trust me. The real rewards aren't material in nature. I have friends now because I know how to be a friend and I know how to nurture and encourage valuable friendships. Instead of the prolonged one night stands I used to call my boyfriends, there is a special man in my life that I've been involved with for almost 5 years. And he and I, that special man, we did get married. And we were married. We dated for quite a long time. Like I said, 5 years there. And then we got married. We were married for almost 20 years. And he passed away sober 4 years ago. And that was the absolute most unexpected because he's older than I am, but not that old. Um, Completely unexpected. He had a heart condition, but we thought we were on top of it. He just died in his sleep in our bed, and I found him. And he was fine, absolutely fine before he went to take a nap. And it was just the most absolutely devastating. There are no words. There are just no words. Um, but I didn't never once felt that I had to drink over any of that. I've seen people in this program. I can think of five off the top of my head who have lost children to suicide, accidents, cancer, and they're still sober. And I used to think, I don't know if I could stay sober if I lost our daughter. We do have a daughter, but I saw them do it. And I thought, if they can do it, then I don't want to do it, but I could do it. So when my husband died, there was never even a question, can I do this? I knew I could do it. I knew I could do it because I had come to meetings and I'd seen people do something that I would think would be even harder. Like, I don't want to compare griefs and traumas, but if these people could suffer the loss of their children and stay sober, then there's no excuse. There's no reason to drink. And even losing my husband unexpectedly after so many years together, pretty much we grew up in sobriety. We were both about a year when we got together, a year and a half, and he had about a year. I knew I could do it. There were days where it wasn't even one day at a time. It wasn't this too shall pass. It wasn't, those weren't helpful. What was helpful was don't drink. That was it. That's all I could manage. Just don't drink. And it was enough. It was enough. Because I'm sitting here 4 years later and I miss him terribly every single day. Every single day. But I did not have to drink to get through that. Where am I now? Most importantly, I know who I am. I know my goals, dreams, values, and boundaries, and I know how to protect, nurture, and validate them. Those are the true rewards of sobriety, and they're what I was looking for all along. I am so grateful that my higher power stepped in to show me the way to the truth. I pray every day that I never turn my back on it. I came to AA in order to stop drinking, and what I received in return was my life. And I will also say that this is pretty much how I wrote it. There are very few. They made very few changes except to the title. They corrected a few very embarrassing grammar errors and typos, spelling errors, things like that. And there were a few sentences that they took out, I think, for space. I had a friend who was really annoyed that they took out Columbo. She was so pissed that they took out, because I'd written in here that I watched Columbo. And she looked over it, she pointed out another story in the fourth edition that talked about watching MASH. And she's like, they left MASH in. Why did they take Columbo out? I'm like, Melissa, I don't know. They don't tell. I got talk about a resentment that's pointless. you know? Oh my goodness. And how clear that the resentment only hurts ourselves. I'm sure the literature committee would not even care if they did know, and they didn't. She was only hurting herself. But so the fifth edition is in the works, and everybody inevitably asks me, how will you feel if your story doesn't make it to the 5th edition? And I'm like, relieved, a little bit, and also spirit of rotation. And yeah, I'm just so grateful for this chance, for this opportunity. It's been such a wild ride. I had no idea, what do I do? How do I handle that my story's in the book? I've met a lot of other story authors. I've met the author of Empty on the Inside, and she is an amazing speaker. She is a circuit speaker, basically. She's an amazing speaker. She doesn't tell anyone she's in the book. She holds anonymity very tightly. She never says anything about her story when she speaks in the book, but she's a circuit speaker. She speaks like twice a month, all over the place. And I've met the guy who wrote A Drunk Like You, or Drunk Like Me. I can never remember what the title is. He tells everyone. His feeling is, I'd want to know. If I walked into a meeting and there's a story author, I'd want to know. Like, so, and I really did have to work with my sponsor to figure out how I was comfortable, because I didn't want to be set apart either. I didn't want to be, looked at as anything different. I didn't want to lose anonymity or feel like I'm like an AA celebrity or something, which, it's just not the way it's supposed to be. And again, my mean sponsor was like, why would anyone think of you as special? Because you write well? And that's really all it is. I just told my story properly, well, honestly, in a way that enough people could relate to it. And if my turn is done, I have no problem with that. I will be happy to pass the baton along to the new story authors. And I would think people would want to hear. I'm kind of like a standard demographic, It would be interesting to hear different and more diverse stories. So that's pretty much where I am with that. I am just so grateful everything that this program has given me. It to try to say and try to put it into words how much I had, despite the loss of my husband. We had a great marriage. It certainly had its ups and downs. There was certainly hard work, but overall we had a fabulous marriage. We had a great time. We have a daughter. I have 2 stepkids and step grandkids. We were just with them last night, or at least some of them. And I'm so grateful for what I have today, because none of it would have been possible if I had kept drinking. None of it. I was crippled. Alcohol crippled me. I was nowhere, just in my parents' house, no friends, no job, no future. And just practicing these principles in all my affairs, following the program, following recovery. There are times I feel like I have the world by the tail, and there are times when I lose my husband, but all the time, I always feel that there's always hope, and there's always a higher power to fall back on and a fellowship to fall back on. And whatever comes down the pike, I can handle it as long as I'm sober. And I think I'm done. I'm done. Thank you again for asking me to speak here. I consider it an honor and a privilege to share at an AA meeting. So I'm very grateful to Carol for asking me to speak, and I'll turn it back to her.
Thank you, Jane. On behalf of everybody, thank you. We're going to open it after the questions and answers, and then you can thank Jane. And I was about 12 years sober when my husband died, so I know that pain. It's not easy. If you have questions you would like Jane to answer, put them in the chat to me. I'm going to introduce Carrie now, who is going to ask questions she has of Jane, and then she'll turn it back to me, and I'll ask the questions you put in the chat, and maybe some I have. And remember, tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern time, 11 UK time, we have another author coming to read her story later today. So come back and join us, and we appreciate you being here. So Carrie, I'm giving it to you. And after I ask my questions, we're going to open the chat and turn everybody's audio on, and you can thank Jane.
Thank you, Carol. I'm Carrie. I'm an alcoholic. Jane, Wow, that was really, really fantastic. Your story, but your share in between the lines, just the share of your gratitude and your hopefulness, and it was just really wonderful. Thank you very much. Your story spoke to me a lot. It really resonated, and we have a lot of the same history. And so it's just really great for me to hear you read in your own words. So thank you. So would you mind telling us a little bit about your relationship with God when you entered AA? What was that like?
Uh-huh. $25,000, or is it like $100,000 these days for inflation? I have serious. That's a big one. Um, I could take all day on that one. I'll try to be brief. My just because of some family history situation, my mother especially has extreme hostility towards organized religion, and so does my grandmother, and I adored my grandmother. Um, had to do with her husband was dying of prostate cancer, and they lived in a farm in Illinois, like a remote, real farm. And the little evangelical church around the corner promised my grandfather that if he signed his farm over to them, that they would pray and cure his cancer. So my grandmother, who was a nurse, who got her nursing license in the 30s and had worked her tail off at the farm and as a nurse, was about to lose her house and lose everything. She had to get a lawyer. And my grandfather died hating my grandmother because he felt that. So that's my background on organized religion. And I adored my grandmother. She was, think of the Beverly Hillbillies and Granny. That was my grandmother, except my grandmother was sharp as a whip. And I adored her. So my coming into the program, the word God just arose so much hostility and distrust, and it was Mike actually that explained to me the difference between religion and spirituality. Um, and I knew from, because I had done so much research, because I was going to fix this. I was going to learn about alcoholism and fix it. That your higher power didn't have to be, a religious God. It could be anything, like a doorknob or a chair. And I didn't need that. I didn't have to have a higher power that was an inanimate object. But the fact that you could made me willing to try, made me willing to look past the higher power piece as something that would have normally kept me away. But the fact that AA was open enough to say God as you understood him, and it really could be anything, that was enough to, okay, I'll come in and I'll try this. And I have had a lot of, that's probably been one of the things I worked on the most with my sponsors, is the conscious contact. And I honestly believe that time hearing the word now in my head was my higher power speaking to me, and or at least working in my life. And I needed that moment to become teachable. That would have not kept me sober. That experience would not have kept me sober, but it made me teachable. I've seen people get these amazing experiences, amazing, and they don't hang on to it. That's what I don't get. I honestly believe we all get what we need. We all get the message we need, whether it's a word in your head or whatever. It's, some of us grab it and some of us don't. And that's the mystery to me. Like, why, how was I willing to grab that? I don't try to figure it out. But that made me believe that there was a higher power that worked in my life. And I have worked, like, still trying to understand a feeling that feels comfortable for me. I really do feel my higher power more with other people and in nature. I don't attend church. I probably never will. But it's funny, if wherever we are, the cathedrals are where I want to visit, like the Vatican, or I was in Berlin for work and I wanted the Berlin Cathedral is where I wanted to go. That's because I love, because what I see, first of all, it's amazing art. But secondly, it's I like to see other people's like other people's attempts, journeys, trying to find their higher power as well. That's what I feel in there is humanity's attempt to reach for the higher power. I don't necessarily want to stay for any services. I don't need to light any candles. I don't need any rites, like the not rights as in, women's rights, but rights like the different like communion or something. But I do love to see the search. And that's one. So that was a long answer. I'm sorry, but that has been probably one of my most difficult and most challenging, is the comfort with a higher power and familiarity, and how am I comfortable with how the higher power works in my life.
And thank you. And, if you don't mind, would you share with us maybe your morning and nighttime routine, if you have one, talking about the conscious contact?
Yep. So, like I said, I just retired. But I was always especially with the pandemic. Um, my company had us all working from home for a long time. Once I get my kid off to school, she's in high school and she can drive, thank God. Oh my, I am not the nervous parent. Like, here's your car. You can drive yourself everywhere now. It's awesome. Um, First thing I do is sit down with my cup of tea, and I do a short meditation just to center. And I also, again, I'm back on the grapevine. The grapevine I don't have any here in my room, I don't think, with me, but they have books that there's the little booklets, like a couple, like 150 to 200 pages. They're themed, like Voices of Women in AA, or AA in the Military, or Sober and Out, emotional sobriety. They all have themes. I think there's 20 or so of them. The home group, the thank you for sharing. That's what I'm reading right now, is thank you for sharing. And somebody pulled all the articles that follow those themes, or a selection of them. And these booklets have just grapevine articles in them, but on these themes. And thank you for sharing is a booklet of the little letters to the editor from the grapevine. So they're short. So I read 10 pages from one of those books every morning, and I go through them. Like, I have this, I don't want to call it OCD, because people with OCD really do struggle, but it's kind of like that. I have all these books lined up in my shelf. They're all numbered, so because they can easily get out of order. They have to be in order. And so I read them one at a time down the line. And I think I've read them 2 or 3 times over, but that's what I read in the morning, 10 pages in that. And that gets me started on my day. I also text or call either my sponsor or a friend that I don't necessarily, I'm usually, if I have to respond to one of my sponsees, I will, but or I look to someone who's like a peer for me in AA, just to check in. And then at night, I don't do the written inventory so much, but I kind of do the reverse on my little seat in the sofa in the evening. And then when I get up to my room, I have this chair next to my bed that I sort of just sit there and take like a reverse meditation, a reverse calm down. How was the day? Just sort of a mental check-in with myself. I do have a little book by my bedside if I feel the need to jot anything down that comes to me. I don't, this is going to be controversial, very controversial, but I don't do a gratitude list. A lot of people told me to do gratitude lists when my husband died, and that just really did not sit right with me. Like, my husband's dead. I can be upset about that, you know, and I can be grateful for my sobriety, but I can also be angry about losing my husband at the same time. It doesn't cancel each other out, you know, and these, like, to say that I should do a gratitude list to move forward. Oh, it just, so I'm still on that. I have to still work on that. I'm not, um, so the gratitude list, I've done them, but they're always the same. You know, I'm very grateful for everything in my life. And so, controversy aside, that's not one thing that's not something I do right now. But I do sit down and just take a look. Where am I at? How did the day go? Where would I wish I had done better? Um, but and if I'm not, there's a woman that I'm talking to now, 40 some years of sobriety. She taught me to, if when she doesn't feel well, to just sit with it with no judgment. And it took me a while to understand what she meant. She just sit with it, say, oh, this doesn't make me feel good, but no judgment. Like, I shouldn't feel this way, or it's petty of me to feel this way, or I should be better than this. She said, no judgment, no feeling, just acknowledgement that I feel a certain way about something, and that can get me to the next step about what to do about it. And that's been helpful.
Thank you. Can you tell us a little bit about meetings when you entered the program, what the AA meetings were like? And
They were smoking. They were, I'm sorry, finish your question. I saw the first thing you said.
yeah, I was going to also ask just what your program looked like in the beginning, how you found a sponsor, when you started the steps, you know, how, tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, that was a long time ago. Well, the first meeting that I went to in my area, because I was at my parents' house where I grew up. There were 3 meetings at a church where I went to Girl Scouts, and I knew I couldn't go to those meetings because I didn't want anyone to see me because I went to Girl Scouts there. Like, that's the logic I had. Like I would never see it. That was 20 years ago from when I was a Girl Scout. Why would anyone be there? It's just that weird, warped drinking thinking, which of course I got over because it was only a mile from my parents' house. The first meeting I went to in my area, so the first 3 meetings that Mike took me to, the first one was really big. Like, the first meeting I ever went to, it was a couple hundred people. A microphone, podium. It was anniversary night. There was a woman who was celebrating 4 years, and I was just amazed. There was a young man who read How It Works, and he was dressed up. I don't know if he just came from work, but he was taking this very seriously. He was dressed nicely. It was anniversary night. He got up to the podium to read How It Works, and you could tell he was nervous. But he got through it. And when he got to the parts that said, many of us exclaim, what an order, I can't go through with it. And so we got to the point where instead of saying we are not saints, he said we are saints. And the whole room started laughing. The whole room, but not at him, but with it. He was laughing as well. And that really had an impact on me, because I could see these people were all laughing together at themselves, not just at this young man, and he was laughing. And then after that, he was comfortable and he finished the rest of it and was obviously not nervous anymore. And that really had an impact on me. It was the first meeting where I stood up and announced, I'm Jane and I'm an alcoholic. And I remember as he was reading How It Works, most of it, the only thing I heard was, remember that we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, and powerful. That I heard. That piece I heard. The rest of it, steps, I was just, what is he saying? Until he said we are saints. Then so cunning, baffling, powerful, and we are saints. then I talked about the meeting where, the second meeting where I was up at the podium. Mike was terrified. He saw me go up. I saw him just like shrink in his chair. He was so scared for me because he knew this was my second meeting. Our third meeting was a very small meeting. It was a physician's meeting, but it was the only one that we could find, and it was open. And there were two women and four men, and me and Mike, and one of the doctors told me after the meeting, you might be too young. You might have to go back out and drink. And I was like, what? What? And I was, what? I'll show you. And no, he was quite, it's like, you may need, but we're always here when you come back. I was like, what? Anyway, all of it. I'm grateful for all of it. All of it. And so when I got here, I went to a meeting close to home, and I went up to the chairperson who I figured was in charge of AA in this area and asked her for information on meetings and how to get around and do what I need to do. I went to meetings every day. And getting a sponsor, there were two women I was thinking of asking to sponsor me. And I called someone else in the program that I wasn't considering asking this one. And I said, who do you think, which one should I ask? And she said, if all else being equal, like really and truly all else being equal, ask the person who has more time. So, okay. So that's what I did. Because they really were. They both had what I wanted, and I liked them both for just as much. So I asked the one, and she was my first sponsor. I did go through a lot of sponsors. I would tell people I felt like Elizabeth Taylor. I was going through a lot of sponsors. The one I have now, I've had for years. I've done a very thorough 4th and 5th step with her. Call her my nice sponsor. I have the one I call my mean sponsor. She got sober in Akron. And even when I was working with her, she had about 30 years of sobriety, and that was at least 20 years ago. So she was by the book, old time, did not mince words. But she's what I needed. She's the one I was referring to when I told my story. Sponsor was sure-handedly guiding me through the steps. That was my mean sponsor that I was talking about. I have a nice sponsor now. And I've been thinking about asking the woman with 40 some years to help me like a sponsor. Because the woman with 40 some years also lost her partner. Her partner died, her partner had dementia. And now she's living with her mother who has dementia, and my mother has dementia right now. I'm not living with her. My dad is still alive. But so this woman has a lot more similarities in life that I'm going through. So that's why I've been working with her as well. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you. My last question is, today, what is your favorite passage in the Big Book?
Oh dear. I'll tell you. And you said that and I went, oh my gosh, I'm stumped. But actually it's page 100. And I thought, where is it? Page 100. First full paragraph. Both you and the new man must walk day by day in the path of spiritual progress. If you persist, remarkable things will happen. When we look back, we realize that the things which came to us when we put ourselves in God's hands were better than anything we could have planned. Follow the dictates of a higher power, and you will presently live in a new and wonderful world, no matter what your present circumstances. So how about that for somebody who's not always up on where her higher power is in her life? But I love that because, first of all, it's in working with others, okay? And it talks all about how to work with a wet drunk. And then all of a sudden, that paragraph just jumps out at me. Like all of a sudden, like your higher power has a better future in mind for you than you could ever. And it's at least true for me. I wouldn't have what I have if I hadn't let go and turned my will and my life over to my higher power. I honestly believe that. I would have shortchanged myself 1,000 times over. And I knew that 15 years ago. So that paragraph has always jumped out to me. So
Wow, thank you. Carol, that's it for me.
Thank you, Carrie and Jane. Thank
Mhm.
you so much. Top of page
Mhm.
100 is one of my favorites too, Jane. And it says, if I persist, and I missed those words for a little while. And the remarkable things, and in the margin in my big book on those pages, I'd write just the date and a couple words for remarkable things. So I'd remember that. There's some questions in the chat, and then I have some, Jane. One of them is, what was your major in college and what did you change it to?
yeah. I had wanted to be a veterinarian since I was a little girl. That I had the James Herriot books. Um, I read all of them, everything I did, all the volunteer work I did. I worked in veterinary hospitals as a volunteer. That was what I had wanted to do. So I started um actually as a chemistry major in college. So as my parents were concerned at that time, biology majors, you didn't have a whole lot of options if you didn't go to grad school with biology. So I started, plus my parents are chemists. My father has a PhD in organic chemistry, and my mother has a master's in chemistry. She taught high school chemistry. She worked at the Fox Chase Cancer Research Center for 10 years. So my dad worked for Roman Haas his entire career, which is now Dow Chemical. Um, so I come from, and my aunt was a professor of microbiology at the University of Illinois in Chicago. So I come from a lot of science people. So it seemed like that would be where I would go. So I started on that, and I could not handle that kind of curriculum with labs and like really tough courses and drink and party. So I changed to a liberal arts major of business and economics, and that's and that was much still challenging. I still almost failed out. Um, accounting. Oh my God, I almost failed that class, but I crammed an entire weekend before the final, and I got a C on the final. So I passed the class and graduated, and then again worked for 2 years in sales. And then I went back and got an MBA at the University of Illinois. And I did go after I got sober. I did work at a couple of veterinary hospitals to see if I wanted to go back and try again, try to see if that's what I wanted to do. And doing that made me realize that really was not what I wanted to pursue. I had an MBA, so I decided I would just go with that. And it took a couple fits and starts, but I finally did find and land in the company that I just retired from. I was 29 when I started working for them, and big pharma, and they were very, very good to me, and a great company to work for. And I have no regrets and no complaints. Everything worked out very, very well.
Thank you. Another one was, how old were you when you got sober? And how old were you when you wrote your story? And has your perspective in any way changed over the years? Would you change any parts of it?
I was 26 when I got sober. So very young in those days, but not so young anymore. I sponsored a woman who was 18. She was totally into the guys, and she asked a guy to sponsor her, and he pointed her to me. And she was batshit crazy, but I loved her. I loved her. Oh my God, she was nuts. She would call me at 2 a.m. and she'd be like, "This is great. This is great. You're my sponsor, so you have to like me." And I'm like, well, that's not quite how it works, but I do like you. I wasn't that much older than her. She's crazy. Oh my God, but I loved her, and she's still sober. She's 48 years old with 30 years of sobriety and two beautiful daughters, both in college. And I've recently reconnected with her. She invited me to come when she got her 30-year coin, and I hadn't seen her in a long time. And so we've reconnected. And she pointed me out as her first sponsor. And I'm like, you were my first sponsee. We were the epitome of the blind leading the blind. I mean, really. But look at us, we're both here and still sober. And there was more to that question. Oh, I wrote my story. I'm pretty certain I wrote the story in February 1998. So I'm pretty sure that's the date that I remember seeing on the top of the manuscript that I sent in. So I was born in 65, so I'll let you all do the math. And they're really, honestly, except for the commentary that I made during the show, I don't really think I would change. Again, I would something minor. I would put that, it was more than just one piece missing. There's a lot of pieces missing. But my perspective as far as how I was thinking when I wrote it, and thinking of the program and thinking of sobriety, there are I've certainly grown in sobriety since I wrote it. Concept of a higher power has changed. And I've peeled a lot of layers of the onion away, but I think the basic perspective of how I feel about sobriety, and that sobriety is the foundation of everything in my life. Nothing happens for me without sobriety first. Everything is built on that. And I have another controversial thing that I say is that I always cringe when I hear it's not about a drink. I'm upset, but it's not about a drink. For me, it's always about a drink. Always. For me, everything I do takes me toward or away from a drink. That's the first things first. The first thing is staying sober. If I'm faced with the decision or something I have to do, always in the back of my mind, does this affect my sobriety at all? And it's almost second nature at this point. Last night I did meet my stepdaughter and her three kids and my daughter. It was the middle grandchild's 8th birthday, and they wanted to meet at Dave and Buster's closer to my house. They were taking them to Dave and Buster's, and she invited us to meet them there because it's close to our house. My very first thought is, there's alcohol served there. Then I go from there. Can I meet them there? Can I do this? Are we available? But the first thought is, how does this affect my sobriety? And then I base my decision. It's always about a drink. Because if I lose sight of that, if I forget that the fact that I'm an alcoholic and that I always have to be first things first, thinking about how does this affect my sobriety, I'll lose it. I cannot afford to lose this foundation of sobriety. And that's just for me. That's how I look. And I'm probably it's just semantics, but that's how I have to look at it for me.
Thank you. Few more questions. Can you elaborate a little more on your realization about changing your goals to suit your behavior versus non-alcoholics that change their behavior to reach their goals?
I certainly didn't realize that that's what I was doing at the time. I honestly just felt that this wasn't for me. I don't know what I was thinking. I mean, I was just drinking. I don't think I really thought about it at all or gave it any kind of rationalization. Or I think about what my parents must have been thinking, or like, again, there's no alcoholism in our family that we know of, at least not like the way that I was drinking. And my aunt liked her martinis, my aunt in Chicago, but she was fine. She held down a great job and marriage, and didn't have any kids because she was more about her career. But she seemed fine. And apparently my dad's grandmother drank. But again, my dad said never to the point that they weren't allowed, he and his brother were not allowed to stay with her or anything. It was never a concern that she was too drunk, but apparently she liked her liquor, but doesn't matter. Um, so I didn't think about it at the time when I did it. I just knew that I didn't even think about I might fail out. I might fail out of college. Um, it just I was so when I think back on myself in those days, I was just so buffeted by whatever forces just happened. And if I knew that I couldn't drink and go to class at this and do this curriculum at the same time. And what I chose was to drink and party because I really, really felt that alcohol was the answer I had always been looking for. All this horrible way that I felt my whole life, that I didn't fit in, that everyone else knew what form they were supposed to fill out or how to open their locker or what room they were supposed to go to. And I didn't have any of that. And I just felt wrong. I just felt that I was wrong. And alcohol made me feel right, at least at first. And it wasn't even a question of am I doing the right thing? This was just what I had to follow. It's really amazing to me when I look back now how powerful and sneaky alcohol is. It really is. I hope that answers the question.
And your perspective of being sober, has it changed over the years, or would you change anything, any part of it?
Change any part of my sobriety? Is that
Perspective of sobriety?
perspective? I don't think so.
Okay.
My perspective, if I'm understanding the question right, I wouldn't change any perspective that I had on sobriety these past 30 some years. I mean, I've changed in sobriety. Simply, I've grown up. I mean, I've grown up. Grew
Okay.
from a young adult to an adult, a full adult, but
We have
again,
some more questions in the chat. Did you meet your husband in AA? And if so, how long was he sober? And how long were you sober when you were married?
we did meet in AA. And he was separated from his first wife for about 6 years when I met him. Is that right? I can't remember. But yes. And he talked about, so he shared, we met at a meeting and he shared something that was an interest that the two of us shared. And so I mentioned, after the meeting, I mentioned to him that we share that same interest. And I was talking to him for a little bit and I realized, holy cow, this guy is right out of rehab. And I didn't realize that at the time. He had like 60 days right out of rehab. And I had almost a year. And I'm like, whoa. But he started following me to meetings. And his first word, when I told him my name at that first time we met, he said, "Your name is tattooed on my body." I was like, oh my God, look at this guy. Because his ex-wife's name is also Jane. Believe that. Anyway, when I realized how little time he had, I backed off. And he got the message. He got the message and he backed off. And then when he was at about not quite a year, he was not quite a year, and I was a little more than a year and a half. He wound up going, it's interesting because he came to a meeting. He was just going to drop off some shoes to the guy who was chairing the meeting. I remember him, Adam. Adam was chairing, and my husband John came to drop off some shoes, some boots to him. And Adam's speaker hadn't shown up. So Adam asked my husband to stay and speak. and he wasn't planning on staying. He was going to drop the shoes off and leave. Well, I went to that meeting with some girlfriends, and we were celebrating one of our friends having 2 years of sobriety. So we were going to go out to dinner afterwards. And so my one girlfriend, it was supposed to be a girls' night for dinner, but she brought her husband. And so she said, can we invite Adam and some guys? Because Rich is going to be upset if he's the only guy. And I'm like, well, why did you bring him? But so we invited Adam and we invited my husband to come. And that's when we started reconnecting. And so after that, we were both pretty new in the program. And when they say getting involved in a relationship is like throwing Miracle Grow on your character defects, that was certainly true for the two of us. Holy cow. Because we were both, he had about a year. He had not quite a year. In fact, after we had been together for a little while, I bought him a dollhouse crib, like robbing the cradle, and he kept his coins and all that. And, but we were together 8.5 years before we got married, because I wasn't sure I wanted to get married. And we got married in 2001, right after 9/11. And then we were together. He passed away November 2019, and he was still sober. So he was sober 27 years when he died. And yeah, it was quite a wild ride, quite a wild ride. I get along very well with his kids, my stepkids. Both of them are always there for me. And I actually get along very well with his ex-wife as well. There were times that I was getting along better with her than I was with him. But we get along just fine. I see them a lot because of the grandkids. And it was really, how do I say it? I'm very, very grateful, very, very grateful for what we had, and that I still have that side of the family to call my own as well. And but yeah, losing him so young was hard on all of us, but I still have his adult kids, and the grandkids, call me Grammy Jane, and the other Jane they call Mimi. So that's how we straighten all that out, so we don't confuse the kids. But anyway, that
Thank you.
answered. Did I miss some?
Yep. Think another question. Can you please explain the title of your story before they changed it, Miss I Never?
Yeah, it's actually Ms. I Never, because I had never crashed a car, never been in jail, never never lost a spouse, never lost kids, never did any of that stuff. And that was one thing we used to say that a lot when I don't know if they still, I haven't heard it as much recently. You say all the I nevers are really not yets. If you want to pick up a drink, they will happen. That's a guarantee. Maybe not right away, but they'll happen. And I believe that because I've seen it happen to other people. That's one thing that I'm very grateful that I'm able to learn from other people in this program who've done the research. I'm sorry they did the research. I wouldn't wish it on anyone, but they've done it, and I'm going to learn from it.
Yeah, there were a lot of yets I didn't have before I got sober. Like I didn't drive, get a DUI and all that, and I've had yets sober. So, all right, let's see. Somebody asked, they love your story. It's inspiring. Have you written other pieces published or not?
I have written a couple things that have gotten published in the grapevine, but I'd be hard pressed to remember. I think one of them was about the that maybe no, that's just, I don't know if I actually wrote that or not. I was just thinking that. There was a whole the grapevine was trying to raise awareness that folks we've been putting $1 in the basket for like 60 years, and maybe with inflation, it might be time to think of. And I think I wrote a response to that, that some people that, in my home, in my area, what they were doing. Like I knew a woman in my area that she said no matter how many meetings she goes to, she puts $1 in the basket. It's $1 a week. And she said she knows that adds up, but she certainly would have spent more drinking. But if she goes to one meeting, she puts $10 in the basket. If she goes to two, she puts 5 each. So it was something on that one I was explaining, and that I had, I could easily do $2 a meeting, and that I was considering trying to think something like that. I don't remember what the gist of it was, but it was something along those lines. So that was more of a grapevine roundtable discussion type thing that they do. I think I responded to that, and there were a couple other ones. I honestly don't remember. I'm pretty sure I saved the grapevines when they came out, but I want to say there were at least 2. There might have been 3, but in reality, I'm really not a writer. I don't even journal. I believe in journaling, but I don't really do that myself, because I can't read what I write. I really honestly truly cannot read what I write. And I've tried to write more clearly, but I just can't. So I'd have to use a computer, and that just feels a little less secure, if that's the right word. But so not really a big writer.
All right. How long were you sober and got into service, and what was that service, and what service do you do now?
I was in service very early, very early. As soon as I had enough time to hold an office, I've actually done every position. I think I've done prison, I've done hospitals and institutions, I've done grapevine rep, I've done intergroup. I think the only one I've been secretary, treasurer, annual chair. I've been down to Sepia, the southeastern Pennsylvania area. That's an intergroup office here locally in Philadelphia. Been volunteered down there. The only thing I haven't done is GSR, ironically, the big one. I have spoken at our Area 59 GSR meeting, because the topic was the big book. And the DCM who was in charge of that meeting, I can't remember what his actual title was, but he had asked me to speak about the experience of being in the books, and I shared mostly what I shared here. The ServiceNow is more along. Okay, so when COVID hit, and we were talking about, like, I'd say we missed 1 week of my home group. I volunteered to get that meeting up on Zoom. So that was my service for that. I was the Zoom host for like you, because we kept thinking we're going to come back in person soon. When it became obvious that wasn't happening, then we had to work on what do we do? What happens next? I can't keep being the Zoom host. They were paying me, and it was my Zoom account, which I used for other things. So I didn't want them to pay me for my Zoom account, because I didn't want to feel like I couldn't use it for anything else. So they were paying me a portion. It was way too confusing. So that piece for several years, and it took a little while to figure out, what does the online intergroup of AA say about setting up Zoom meetings and anonymity, and not aligned with any other enterprise, not owned by me, not owned by anyone else. So we figured out how how to get the group to have its own Zoom account, and its own, and tie it into the bank account, have a PayPal account and get donations put there to really and truly have the group covering this so that anyone can be the Zoom host. That was my service the past 4 years. And it's been about a year now that we have figured it out, and it's been working. We have 5 hosts for our meeting. I think we're down to 4. Because now my home group voted to be strictly online. We're not going back in person, not my home group. And it's been really nice. We've got people from, we're based out of Norristown, Pennsylvania, which is a small city outside of Philadelphia. And we have people from West Virginia. We have people from, where's the one came, she was on a bus in New York City and she dialed in. And it was just, there are a couple people like that, some from California that come in, people that have moved away, people that live downtown that can't get to the meeting anymore if it were in Norristown. So that's really nice. But now that I'm retired, that's definitely on my plan. I'm decompressing right now. I'm taking until April 1st to decompress. And then after April 1st, I'm going to figure out what is my next move. What am I doing next? And definitely AA, service in AA is going to play a large role in that. I just don't know what it'll look like yet. That's where I am.
Okay, I've got a couple more in the chat. One of them asked, what feedback would you give for someone that is shy about writing their experience, strength, and hope? And somebody else asked for your home group info.
Shy about writing their story would be just do it. I know that's really lame, but it's you can stay anonymous. I mean, you really can stay anonymous. When I first you're certainly not going to get outed by the Grapevine Literature Committee or GSO or any of those. You'll be outed by people that you tell yourself who, and that's how it happened for me. I was, one of my good friends, my husband and my good friends from early recovery, like really, we remember him when he came in. He's very active in service. He was a DCM for many years or at least for, I think he did it, then he rotated out, then he did it again for our local area. And he's the one that he asked me, he said, my son-in-law runs this online meeting. Is it okay if I give him your information? And he's the one who got me to speak at the Area 59 meeting. And then from there, it just sort of keeps going. Whoever you tell, but you can stay anonymous. I mean, I think I announced it at one meeting. I announced it at my home group at the time. I said, this is the only time I'm going to say it, but I just heard that my story is going to be in the 4th edition of the big book. And, but that's the only time I said it in a meeting. I would write it as if you don't plan to send it. Honestly, write it as if you don't plan to send it. And at least for me, what worked was just absolutely writing, just writing. I didn't edit it the first night. I didn't try to make it perfect. I just wrote it because I wasn't even sure if I would really send it, because I just thought it would be cleansing to do it. So I wrote it one night, put it away, put it aside, and then the next night I edited it, and I thought, what the hell? And I sent it in. But you can stay as anonymous as you want. And yeah, I would just say write it like you don't plan, just like you don't plan to send it, and see what happens.
Thanks. How long were you sober when you started going through the steps? And
very new in recovery. I want to say within the first 6 months, my first sponsor was taking me through the steps, and I was doing I did a 4-step at about a year. My first one, it was certainly not very thorough at all. It was the best I could do at the time. Um, More will be revealed, but yeah, we didn't race through them. Um, my sponsor at the time was shooting for doing a 4-step at about a year sober, not not sooner than that, but not a lot later either. And that is about how it worked out.
Okay. Is there anything that stands out to you in your early recovery? Maybe the slender threads that happened that if something didn't happen, you might not have been in AA?
Well, meeting Mike for sure. When I did, um, because, and what he said, what he has told me is that he talked to people after we got back from San Diego, and he had said that if he hadn't relapsed and wasn't feeling so awful about himself, he probably would have never said anything to me. He wouldn't have been upset. He just would have been working in the booth and um, just going along his merry way. And if he hadn't said anything to me, you know, it, if that had not happened, I don't really know where I would be. I don't think too much about that, because to me that's like, um, it's like what my mean sponsor used to say, borrowing trouble. But yeah, I do believe that if that hadn't happened, that I would not have come in nearly as early as I did, and I have no idea where I would be at this point.
Okay, let's see. I think I have a question for you. What do you find now with years of sobriety you do that helps you not only to stay sober, but to live a peaceful life no matter what is happening in your life? And did you have anything that your sponsor told you early in sobriety that you still use? Like I use lots of prayers I was given when I was new, or some real simple things my sponsor told me. Are there some that just come to mind?
Well, yeah, like what I had just said, my my mean sponsor saying her whole attitude, her about borrowing trouble. I still use that a lot. Um, a lot of people call it projecting. It's the terminology for, you're projecting. She called it borrowing trouble, and that stuck with me and has stuck with me quite a bit. Um, there there was one thing that stuck with me very early on. A woman I respected, this long before the story, long before I was maybe a year sober, and I had said something to her that I wondered, that I felt like I was young enough that I probably had another, I had another recovery in me. Like we used to say, I know I have another drunk in me. I don't know if I have another recovery in me. And I had said to her, I think I probably do. I'm young enough. I probably do have another recovery in me. And I just remember the look of horror on her face. And she looked at me and said, "You don't know that." And it that has really stuck with me. You don't know that. And I'm thank God she said that. Thank God she said it the way she said it. And because it slapped that right out of my head. It slapped that drinking thinking right out of my head. So that stayed, and I think that's still the case. I don't know that. I don't know anything. I just know what works for me today. And there was a first part of that question that I've forgotten.
Oh, that's okay. I don't, what what do you find now with your years of sobriety that helps you to stay sober no matter what is happening?
Well, it's a trust in the universe, a trust in the higher power, um, however I may or may not understand the higher power, a trust that, I have a hard time believing that, um, I have a hard time believing things work out for a reason, but I wholeheartedly believe that the higher power is there, or that I can use the higher power to get through anything. That the higher power, that is there to help me, that to give me strength and courage when I need it. If I choose to turn toward it, it's always there. Um, Things happen, and it's not just how I react, but it's what do I use? What tools do I use? Where can I pull strength? And that to me is where, as much as I don't understand it, um, I've stopped kind of trying to understand it. That's where I know that I can get through anything.
Thanks. Sounds like you and I both have that contempt prior to investigation when we were new. I know I did. Last good, have you been to any international conventions, and are you planning on attending Vancouver in 2025?
I am planning on going to Vancouver, and I have actually not been. This will be my first one. This is my first one, but I have the maps and I don't know if you can see it because I got the blur. I got the maps and the calendar right here because I'm going to start in Calgary in June, and Banff, Jasper, Lake Louise, all that, and then down to Waterton, which is the Canadian half of Glacier National Park in Montana. And see I've been to all those places, but I was very young. And so my daughter and I will spend a couple weeks there first and then drive over to Vancouver for the international convention. Then we'll fly home from Vancouver. Or actually, no, I've decided I'm going to drop down into the US and go to the Cascades and Olympic Mountains. I just made that decision a couple of weeks ago. I'm like, duh, I'm all the way out there. Why not? I have a lot of family in Seattle, or in that area. So I have two cousins. I had a great uncle and a second cousin, but they both passed away. And my grandparents used to live on Bainbridge Island. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that area, but that's right outside of Seattle. So I love that area. So I'm going to go ahead and visit there too, and then fly home from Seattle.
Very good. Yeah, I went to the Seattle International in 1990. I was 2 years sober. But thank you so much for doing this with us, Jane, for sharing so honestly and openly. And I know a lot of people left, but everybody enjoyed you being here, and thank you so much. And I think, Drew, can you give everybody the ability to unmute?